So we come to Indulgences. Having had this releasing insight, Luther thought about what he saw in the contemporary church and was troubled. One of the things that most worried him was the sale of indulgences. Leo X, the Pope at the time, was wanting to rebuild St. Peter's Basilica as the greatest and best church in the world, and the glory of Renaissance art, architecture and art. He also quite enjoyed life between his pious moments, so he needed a lot of money. Indulgences was something the church could offer to help people's tender consciences and to give them a way of feeling that they were doing all they could for their dead relatives. Leo X expanded the sale of indulgences into a franchise operation. And so Nick Page puts it like this. In the German region of Mainz and Magdeburg, Archbishop Albrecht was given the franchise. And among the indulgence salesmen who arrived in the region was a man called Johannes Tetzel. Tetzel was the king of indulgence salesmen. If there had been an indulgence version of The Apprentice, he'd have walked it every time. While there's no direct evidence that he used the catchy advertising jingle, "As soon as the coin in the coffer rings, the soul from purgatory springs," his surviving sermons show that it would not have been a sentiment he disagreed with. It was claimed that an indulgence would work even if you were guilty of violating the Mother of God. Tetzel was particularly adept at the use of emotional blackmail. "Have mercy upon your dead parents," he would urge those who were listening and hesitating over whether to stump up. And it didn't cost much, just a couple of pennies. And as an added bonus, if you donated, you would be free from purgatory yourself. Now, Frederick the Wise banned indulgence salesmen from his territories, but Tetzel established a pop-up indulgence shop just a few miles from the border, in the town of Jüterbog. Suddenly, people started turning up at Luther's confessionals armed with brand new copies of their indulgences. They no longer had to do any kind of penance, and they had the paperwork to prove it. On the 31st of October, 1517, Luther wrote to the Archbishop of Mainz, "There are those souls which have been committed to your care, dear Father, being led into the paths of death, and for them you will be required to render an account. Christ has nowhere commanded indulgences to be preached, only the gospel." And Luther backed up his letter with 95 short statements to buttress his argument, and pinned them to the university notice board, which is the door of the Castle Church of All Saints. Well, possibly. It's Philip Melanchthon who writes of this after Luther's death in 1546, and Luther himself doesn't mention it, which is surprising since he wrote about plenty of other things. But almost certainly Luther actually included these theses in his letter to the Archbishop. The texts of the theses are in the texts file. Please go and read that now, and we'll come back together to discuss what you've read.